Good evening, folks. This is Andy Pedraza with Special Effects Academy. We're on the start of the week session in the Forex trading room for February 14th of 2021. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. We'll be going through our standard agenda, look at the prior week's results, our currency strength meter for the week, fundamental announcements scheduled, a look at the major peers on the daily charts, any setups we see in progress, and a few words in conclusion. Starting with the ledgers, and I can tell you right now, no significant change from last week. We're within a percentage point of where we were a week ago today. So it was a pretty flat, if bouncy market. And as I said, well, no change to any of the accounts. In fact, we still have the same trades open, maybe one or two new trades here and there, which were replacements, but otherwise it was a perfectly flat week. That goes for the long-term account on screen right now, for the intermediate term account on screen right now as well. And this is the one where we opened a few trades that are still open, but since they haven't evolved to the point of taking profit, we're still pretty much where we were when the week began. And the short-term ledger, same thing. In fact, no change at all. The trades that are currently open are more than a week old, and no changes were made this week. Notes and opportunities for improvement. As I said, an almost perfectly flat week, though it did get bouncy towards the beginning. We were carrying some losses as the week began, but they quickly reversed, and we ended the week carrying some profit on pretty much all of the accounts. And the market open today is continuing to move in our favor. Ex-President Trump was acquitted for the second time on impeachment charges. So the Democrats, I guess, are now going to try a third way because they can't seem to let go. This bad marriage where you got rid of the wife, but you keep calling her every day to see how she's doing. That's what the Democrats are doing right now. I'm having fun with it. Obviously, I really don't care what happens other than how it impacts the market, but I do get some, I guess, satisfaction in making fun of what's going on. There is a very bullish outlook on the pound from the market, mainly because the vaccination efforts in the UK are on target, and they will reach their 15 million vaccinated population by the end of the month, I think. They're actually a little bit ahead. Not sure how that's going to play out. I would be very skeptical of reading too much into that. The market is very fickle, and it may turn on the pound just as easily as it's now carrying it on its shoulders. We'll continue trading as we are. We are bullish on the pound ourselves, but we're also ready to take profit and get out at the, I guess, flip of a coin. The dollar is still highly vulnerable. Not sure what the impact of the acquittal on ex-President Trump is going to have on the markets. It really shouldn't have any effect, but the market, again, is not rational and does react in uncertain ways. The Australian dollar continues to hold on to gains and even slowly expand, but this is another one where I'm not sure that we're going to have too much of a continuation. It seems already stressed at the extreme. Relative strength meter for the week, the dollar a clear loser. It lost the most ground out of any of the currencies, and the Australian dollar the clear winner. The other ones, I guess we can say that the Kiwi lost a bit of ground. The pound, of course, gained, as did the Swiss. The yen continues to be a loser, and the euro and the Canadian were pretty flat for the week. Fundamental announcements scheduled. We do have the FOMC minutes at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, and we have the employment change out of Australia also Wednesday in the evening. Very likely we're going to have our evening session a little bit earlier on Wednesday to accommodate for the Australian numbers. With that, we move on to the charts. Commodities, oil continues making higher highs, and we're now at $60 a barrel on the WTI. Quite a change from back in November when it was still struggling to break above 40. We're now a good $20 up, which means a 50% gain since November, for those of you keeping track. And of course, this will continue to play out as, for one, President Biden has slashed oil production in the US. So instead of being net exporters, which we have been for the past couple of years, the US will have to again import most of its oil from, well, whoever's selling. This is sure to continue weakening the dollar and, of course, increasing oil price as less in production implies a tighter market. Euro dollar, moving on to the currencies, it was a recovery week for the euro dollar, so it did end above where it began the week. Also popped back above the trend line. It's still in the middle of the Ichimoku cloud, but Wednesday through Friday was a very flat market, even though Friday was a good retrace and bouncy market, but ended up right where it began the day. It's still very much below resistance, so there's still a good opportunity there to take those pips if the dollar continues weakening. Pound dollar ended the week at a more than 2-year high, almost a 3-year high, and doesn't show any signs of stopping. It's just following a trend and continuing to move up, up, and away. USDJPY is, I guess, the contrarian among the dollar pairs. It did make it made a decent drop. Let's not say it did recover against the dollar significantly Monday into Tuesday. Wednesday was absolutely flat, and then Thursday, Friday retraced about halfway back up. So it did end the week at a stronger position against the dollar, but it's still not out of the woods, and we're still waiting on a break of support to take us further into well, the bottom ranges of that price action towards the 103 and hopefully even beyond. My target for the USDJPY has always been about 100 yen per dollar. It's still almost 500 pips above that, so that's quite a good bit of opportunity right there. USD Canadian right above the bottommost level of support, so it is in a very, very bearish position. Also dropped the first half of the week and then pretty much went flat the remainder, but still ending up well below where it began. USD Swiss, same thing, except it didn't stop at the middle of the week. It just kept going down into Swiss strength against the dollar. And we saw that in the relative strength meter that the Swiss had a pretty good week. The only exception to that was Friday, as it retraced very slightly, but still ending the week in a much better position and still well above support. Another pair that's giving a fine opportunity, if only to trade it back to 250 or so pips towards the bottom. Aussie dollar ending the week very near the topmost level of resistance, not making a higher high. It was shy about 100 pips from doing that, but still moving in that direction. It was a complete week of Aussie dominance over the dollar. No slowdown, no going flat in the middle of the week, just kept moving higher and higher. Kiwi dollar had a rougher week. It went sideways for most of it, and indeed, while it did end the week slightly higher than where it began, and at least it's now following that trend line and above the Ichimoku cloud, it seems to have had a much rougher time. Not sure what that means in the grand scheme of things, where the Kiwi is running out of steam. There should be no reason finally that the Kiwi economy is on pretty solid ground right now. The impact from the COVID has been very slight in New Zealand. And of course, we know that the dollar is in a bearish mood. So all things being equal, not sure why the market didn't fall in love with the Kiwi dollar this past week, but I do expect it to break the top. That's it for the dollar pairs. Aussie Canadian also very near the top, and it was a bullish week for this pair as the Aussie made some pretty good inroads. Not a lot of slowdown. It just kept going up. And of course, we're still waiting for the break at the top. Euro Swiss, which we've been ignoring for quite a while, is still trapped in a rather wide sideways channel. Call that about 200 pips worth of channel. And it's been a top hugger for quite a while. So there has been no trip to the bottom of the channel since back in October. So that's about 5 months worth of trading, where it's been nowhere near the bottom. It's riding above a wedge. It's at a strong level of support resistance and just below the top of its sideways channel. Once it breaks or turns around, I will consider putting this back into the active trading roster, but for now, we'll just continue observing. Euro pound broke, or rather stayed below the new level of resistance, prior support from the week before, but pretty much was a flat week. It didn't move net much, but it did test resistance and then continued moving down. Right now, it is a little bit under 100 pips above the final level of support before it goes into a little bit of a free fall scenario. And we'll be tracking this. We didn't grab that move. It was just too slow moving. There were better things to catch. And well, we'll see if we can get a ride once it does break support. EURJPY ended the week at the highest level of resistance on the chart. Didn't quite break to a higher high, would have needed to break that resistance, but it is looking as if it might at some point break. I'm still bearish on this pair. I think that higher level of resistance has held so far and will continue to hold, but again, we'll have to see what the market says. Euro Canadian also in a sideways channel, but very near the bottom and starting to rise. And we did take a trade on this one a week or so back, attempting to trade it up towards the top of the channel. It did end the week higher than where it had started, but had quite a steep retrace on Friday. We'll have to wait and see what the week gives us now that it's begun. Pound JPY, one of the breakouts, confirmed breakouts out of the week, and we are trading this pair to the tune of about 300 pips of profit, 200 of those protected, and it's looking like there's no stopping it. It's just going to continue going up. The targets are 300 to 400 pips away, and you have to go out into a weekly chart to identify the next levels of resistance. So we'll see what this gives us. I'm very hopeful we'll continue and, well, give us even more profit than what we're carrying right now. AUDJPY, also a breakout at the top, and while it didn't move as, I'm going to say drastically as the pound JPY, it was still a good mover. Ended at a high, no high as high on the daily chart as far as we go back here, which is April of last year. We have to go out into a weekly to find a higher high. And indeed, it's at least 2 years back. So we're now looking at if we continue seeing the yen bearishness and the Aussie strength, this one might be a good play, and we'll certainly consider that as we kick off the week. Euro New Zealand was seeking support, bounced off of that early in the week, went back up to resistance, and then started bouncing down. It did end at a higher point than where it began, but you can see that the trend is still significantly bearish. And the fact that resistance wasn't broken is a pretty good indicator of a potential break of that bottom this week, next week, whenever. But it looks to be still a very bearish chart. Pound Canadian is at the top of its chart, which is where I would normally expect a bounce and an opportunity to trade it back down towards support. I don't expect that in this case. I'm still very bullish on the pound. I'm not bearish on the Canadian per se, but I think the pound has a lot more upside than the Canadian. This pair is very likely to break the top and keep going. So we'll keep an eye on this one as well. Pound Swiss, of course, made a higher high very recently and had a splendid move on Friday, which undid an entire week of bearish movement. Now, it wasn't a deep bearish move. It was just a little bit of a retrace. Didn't even go near support. But on Friday, it pretty much undid the entire week's drop and ended up right where it began. Obviously, I would have been happier if it ended up higher, but still, that is a quite impressive move for a Friday. Also taking into account that the Swiss had a pretty good week. So the Swiss did improve against pretty much everybody except the pound. And last but not least, the pound Aussie was flat, and we are trading this one on at least 2 of the accounts. It did go in both directions. So as I said, it was a bouncy market to some degree. and it ended the week really right where it began. So we're still waiting for that bounce off of support and a move to a higher high or rejoining the trend line, and we will give those trades time to evolve. That's it for the charts. Setups we see in progress. The pound, as I've been saying, is extremely bullish in market sentiment right now, which should be taken as cautionary. Sometimes the market overreacts, overextends itself in whichever sentiment, bullish or bearish, and then you see a correction. Long term, I'm still very bullish on the pound. I'm just saying that be careful we don't have some sort of a retrace before the upward movement continues. The dollar is back in its slump. The prior week was a bullish week for the dollar, completely inexplicable, and last week was it just resumed its drop. I don't see any good outlook for the dollar, at least throughout the course of this year. Obviously, that could change depending on what policies come out of the White House, the impact of COVID, the effectiveness of the vaccine, and a dozen other variables. But right now, I really don't see any option for good news coming out of the dollar. The Australian pairs, the Australian dollar is at an extreme. I mentioned that as well. So look for either a breakout, which would be a continuation, or a bounce at any point. It hasn't moved much. It's still been bullish, but it hasn't moved away from the previous levels of support resistance. The yen, the JPY, is still weak, although it is finding resistance, especially against the dollar. It's struggling to go against the dollar, but it is managing it very slowly. And the Canadian pairs, last but not least, the Canadian is, of course, benefiting from the oil move, but is still very, very sluggish. Keep an eye on the Canadian pairs. At some point, the market will take a look at the Canadian dollar, see that there's really nothing wrong with it, and start moving it back into a bullish pattern. The presentation itself, a few words in conclusion. I always try to make some suggestions or share a little bit about what's going on. And today I decided to focus on valuing time. Time is the one thing you cannot make more of. You can't say, I need more time. Well, you can, but it's not going to happen. You've got 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, et cetera, et cetera. You have to learn to identify time sucks and get rid of them. These might be friends, colleagues, family, business partners, even strangers. They all want time from you, from the cold call or the robocall to whatever friend wants to chat for an hour about nothing much. Now, not everyone is a time suck. I have some very, very few, but still very close friends. And time spent with them, chatting with them, talking with them is not lost. But besides them, and besides anyone that adds value to my day, you have to learn how to say no and say it firmly. You don't need to be polite about it. In fact, be as insulting as you want. It might keep some of them from coming back. But if you let people steal your time, and trust me, they are going to try, there is no getting that time back. Then later on, when you want something from these people, well, sometimes they do love wasting time, an hour of their time back. But again, it's of no value. So use your precious time to grow or even take some rest. Don't waste it on stuff that you don't need to be doing. That's it for me this week. Do I have any comments or questions from anyone before we call it a wrap? Okay, folks, thank you very much. I will see you tomorrow. Again, we'll probably be having a different schedule for Wednesday, which is when we have the fundies, but I'll send that out in the email, and I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.